Hello, and welcome to part 2 of the Navy Mustang Spouse Symposium, presented by CORE in partnership with the Navy League of the United States. We're so glad you could join us for this live conversation with our community managers and detailers for the Mustang community. We hope that this presentation allows you to better understand the detailing process. CORE is one of many programs which make up Naval Services FamilyLine, which is a 56-year-old all-volunteer nonprofit organization. Our mission is to empower sea service families to meet the challenges of a military lifestyle with resources, education, and mentoring. My name is Danielle Newald. I've been a Mustang spouse for nearly 10 years now, and I will be serving as your moderator today. In part 1 of the Navy Mustang Spouse Symposium, we reviewed the history and traditions of the Mustang community. If you've not yet viewed part 1, please visit the Naval Services FamilyLine website and click on the Core Events tab. Or you can visit the Naval Services FamilyLine YouTube channel. Both links will be posted on the CORE Facebook page for your reference. For today's event, we're pleased to have detailers from 4 warfare communities: aviation, surface, submarine, and intel. Please welcome Captain Sudduth, Captain Farrell, Commander Dwyer, Lieutenant Commander Stevenson, and Chief Warrant Officer Harehill. We understand that every community will not be represented today, but we hope the information the detailers share will help provide more clarity as you and your spouse go through the detailing process as a Mustang family. Upon registering for the event, you are given the opportunity to submit a question for our detailers. Following their presentations, we'll have a short question and answer session. If you have a question for the detailers today, please utilize the chat box. We'll do our best to go to any submitted questions, but note our detailers will likely be unable to answer very personal questions or questions that are particular to your individual circumstances. With that said, let's get started. Up first is Captain Farrell. Welcome, Captain Farrell.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I am Captain Cass Farrell, the Surface LDO CW Assignments Branch Head. Just to give you a little idea, for the surface side, we have 4 separate branch of detailers that fall under the surface side. They are the security and administration. They have a detailer that handles that, Lieutenant Novakovic. Then you have the ops and deck, operations and deck, that's Lieutenant Commander Race. And then you have the engineering, which is Lieutenant Commander Stevenson. And then you have electronics, which is Lieutenant Commander Devers. All 4 of those branches fall under the surface side of assignments. Just to give you a little idea of the newest session officers, their timeline, and kind of just an idea of how it worked. The newest session officers, they get commissioned on the first day of each month. So throughout the year, on the first day of every month, we commissioned the newest session officers. Once they get commissioned, the next thing that they have to do is go to the LDO CW Academy, which is in Rhode Island. So every newest session officers, once they get commissioned, the first stop that they have to go to is go to school. That is in Newport, Rhode Island. That's called the LDO CW Academy. We kind of have a nickname for it, call it the Knife and Fork School. So you kind of go there. That school is 18 days. So you go there and kind of learn how to be an officer, and they teach you all the different stuff of being an officer and the different wardroom etiquette and so forth. Once you complete that, after that 18 days, then your next stop will be school requirement. So for each job that you are going to do, there's some of those jobs require school. So for example, if you're going to a cruiser, for example, a ship that's a cruiser, that ship has certain missiles on it and have certain weapons on it that you would have to go to school to learn that particular ship. So after you finish Newport, Rhode Island, then you go to that school. That school, for some of the schools, it varies. Some of them is on the West Coast in San Diego, some is in Norfolk, Virginia, some is in Dahlgren, Virginia. So it varies. Some of those school lengths varies also. Some is 3 months, some is 4 months, based on what that ship has. After you finish that school, then you go on to your first actual ultimate duty station. And that's where you go to where you're really going to be assigned. So in between, from when you commission to when you go to that first assignment, there is a little bit of leeway time where you go into school and getting yourself prepared. Once you get to that first officer tour, that first ultimate duty station, prior to arriving there, there'll be some leave authorized. Sometimes it's based on you get 30 days leave. Leave is where you get to be with your family and be with friends and stuff like that. So you get a little bit of leave in between going from when you commission to when you're going to get to your ultimate duty station. Leave is built into that. The tour length, now, for how long you're going to be at a particular command for that first tour, it varies based on location. So I'll give you an example. If your first tour is in Japan and you take your family with you in Japan, it's mandated by instructions that you have to do 3 years because you take your family with you. So 3 years in Japan with dependents. If you're single and you went to Japan and didn't take your family, or even if you're married and you go to Japan and you didn't take your family, then it'll be 2 years because you went unaccompanied. So that's tour lengths, just an idea of the tour lengths. Again, we currently on the surface side has 2,800 constituents that the detailers that I mentioned earlier details. And kind of closing, just to wrap it all up, our goal is basically getting every new accession officer on the right foot as a commissioned officer and allowing them to spearhead their professional growth. You just have to remember that as new officers, you're worldwide assignable, and it's possible for them to relocate on their first or second tour to meet the Navy's mission. So a lot of times when you get commissioned, I mean, sometimes you might be stationed in San Diego or Norfolk, Virginia, your whole entire career, and now you become an officer, you have to move. And that's one of the things that when you go to get commissioned, they say, hey, you need to be worldwide assignable to take the tours of where the Navy needs you. But we also take into consideration if you have family members and there's some issues there and things like that where we need to keep you in a specific location, that is also looked at. But from on the onset, being worldwide assignable is one of our main keys. And my team and I, we're standing by to assist all these officers in their transition. That is all I have, and I'll pass it back to Captain Sutter, the aviation captain.
Thank you so much, Captain Farrell. Hi, Captain.
Morning, everyone. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. First, I'd just like to thank all the spouses out there for their support. Your spouse would not be at this stage of the game, achieving these accomplishments if it wasn't for their support. So thank you. I am the aviation detailer head. My assistant is Lieutenant Commander Alexander. We have approximately 1,250 constituents. We have 9 different designators that we detail to. Very similar to the surface side. They go through the academy as well. Afterwards, we have multiple courses that they will do for follow-on training. That varies from 1 week to 4 weeks of training that they may have. If there's a length of time in between the training from the academy to their follow-on training, they will most likely, if it's longer, they can take some leave, or we will do an intermediate stop at their ultimate duty station so that they can save leave in between. Something that we take into consideration when we're doing the initial detailing is their previous experience that they have in the aviation community. We'll also look at if they are a spouse colo, if there's EFM situations, those sort of things that we take into the detailing. But ultimately, as Captain Farrell mentioned, we're filling the Navy's requirements first. And that's all I have for the time being. I'll wait for the additional questions to elaborate a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain Sedith. Up next, we have Commander Dwyer. Welcome, Commander Dwyer.
Hello, everyone. Am I coming in okay?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right, great. Good afternoon. Yep, I echo previous captains. Thanks for joining us, and we definitely need the family side for support and appreciate everything you all do. I think what you're going to find, yeah, our paths are all pretty similar as far as as far as what's already been discussed, going to school and all that. And I forgot to even mention, yeah, in our shop we detail the both the nuclear and the submarine or the non-nuclear warrant officers and LDOs. And we're a little smaller staff. That sounds like everybody else. We only have 2 detailers. So one detailer takes care of all the nukes, and then we have another detailer that takes care of the submarine or the non-nuclear folks. Again, similar paths to what the surface first captain was talking about. The nukes, they're pretty much always in the engineering world. So their seashore rotation, as mentioned, it kind of resets. The standard entering argument is 3 years at sea, 3 years at shore, back and forth. The 2-year unaccompanied, if you go overseas, is an option for us as well. But so the nukes, now nukes we gather from both the submarine and the surface community. But when you become nukes, you typically are going to go to surface ships, so carriers mainly. There's some tender repair ships out in Guam that you can go to, but yeah. So nukes are basically all engineering. For the submarine folks, it's going to be they're split into engineering, weapons, electronics, and communications. And the same thing, even though your seashore rotation starts over again, as already mentioned, we can the detailers can negotiate and look at if there's any special cases, exceptional family members, kids in high school, those kind of things. So we can adjust. A lot of times there's negotiating room and room to maneuver there, but I think that's about, like I said, everything else is pretty similar. Unless there's any specific questions that come up later, I can address. That's all I got for surface and submarine nuclear.
All right, thank you so much. And lastly, Chief Warrant Officer Harehill, how can you talk to us about your community today?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate everybody coming in. And it's been said earlier, I thank the spouses for their service as well, because while you may not don the same uniform that we do, or have to show up for muster or whatever the case may be, as you look at your dinner table on a holiday, anniversary, any other important day for your family, and that seat where your service member sits is empty, you are serving and sacrificing for our nation just as much as we are. So we thank you for that. I'll highlight what's different for us in Intel based on what we've heard previously, and not to belabor any points. But the biggest thing that makes the Intel community different is that we don't have LDOs. We're strictly warrant officers. And we break our warrant officer community down into 3 pillars, which focus on the 3 main pillars of intelligence. So we have counterintelligence and human intelligence specialists. We have operational intelligence specialists and geospatial/targeting specialists. That work that we've done to break our designator into basically 3 groups has made us the preeminent chief warrant officer designator in the entire Navy. So, conceivably, you could be the best warrant in the Navy if you're Intel. We'll leave that up to other people's imaginations, but that's what we like to think. After you get commissioned, you go to Mustang University, as the others have mentioned, and then after that, you report to your command for the most part. Back in the old days, at least when I was selected, we had a saying that you're ready on day 1, and that's what we expect from our Intel warrant officers. Be ready on day 1, execute the duties and mission that you need to do, and you are supposed to be a technical expert the day you get commissioned. So that is the expectation. We shouldn't have to send you to a bunch of schools to get you recalibrated and things like that. There are some one-off circumstances where that may happen, but for the most part, they get commissioned, and within about 30 days of being commissioned, they'll be at their very first duty station. As far as billets, what we offer, it really depends on what CCA or focus area your warrant officer falls into. But our billets run the globe. San Diego, Virginia Beach, Washington D.C. We have some overseas billets in Japan, Guam, things like that. It really just depends on what goes on. But for the most part, we detail our officers 3-year tours. And then if we need to pull somebody a little early to go fill another emergent need, then we may do that, understanding that right now, at present, I can only fill about 70% of the billets that I have on the books. So if we have somebody that's on shore duty and we have operational sea duty billet that pops up, we may pull them early, but we, as a practice, we don't do that because we understand the importance of family planning and understanding, if your officer is on, shore duty and things like that. But, from the detail and shop, we communicate as much as possible with our officers, let them know what's going on. And this is a very appropriate timing and ironic timing to have this, as the new list of warrant officers came out yesterday. So we're starting this whole process over again with getting the new members prepared and starting the detailing process with those individuals. But that's really what makes Intel different. We have no LDOs. We're broken down to 3 focus areas. And if you have any specific questions, please let us know, or push it to your officer. But pretty much everything else everyone said is holds true for us.
Thank you so much. And we're going to welcome all of our detailers back now. We're going to have a question and answer session. So we have some questions that were submitted prior to you guys joining us today. And then if there are any questions from our audience today, feel free to pop those in the chat box, and our tech team will get them over to me, and we'll try our best to get to as many as possible. But yeah, I just wanted to thank each of you. That was all great information, and we're so thankful to hear it. Some of the questions that have come up, and you guys are welcome to each answer individually, or if it's all the same, someone can pipe up as well. But what are the similarities or differences in the detailing process for our newly selected Mustangs versus when they were enlisted, and what are the major differences that they'll find? Captain Farrell?
Yeah, well, enlisted detailing is kind of different in the sense of, for enlisted, I'll share with you, enlisted, you don't have the interaction with the detailer like you do on the enlisted side. It's more of, they send out stuff on the computer for you to kind of choose from, and you look at these various jobs, and then you go back to your family members and say, hey, these are the 5 jobs that you get, or whatever the jobs is assigned. These are the jobs that you can have. For LDOs, well, as an officer, the jobs is a lot more limited than the enlisted side. Like, for example, even when you go to a ship, if you look on a ship, the enlisted crew on a ship is a lot bigger than the officer crew.
Right.
Sometimes it's even triple, 3 times the size. So as far as the detailing is different, because based on where you can go, the limitations of where you can go, where sometimes as an enlisted, you might have, 10 options in Japan, 10 different jobs that you can do in Japan. Whereas for officer, there might be only 1 assignment that we have in Japan that member can go and do. And then additionally, the whole process, your detailer, the member will negotiate with a detailer. Enlisted side do have a detailer, but it's mostly done via computer, where you go in and you pick out your jobs, and then you submit it in and say these are the jobs that you want. Well, with your detailer, it's more interaction, talking with the detailer, more personal. So that's kind of just a roundabout area, just to give an idea on it.
Okay, so we can probably expect that this is a much more personalized experience, but maybe not as many broader options.
Correct.
Correct. And so would that ring true for the other communities as well?
I would add for Intel, I think I agree with Captain Farrell that I think the word that I would use to describe it is more intimate, because as he said, in the enlisted process, you're kind of just another cog in the wheel, and you don't get that direct one-on-one, discussion with the detailer. Whereas when you become a warrant officer, at least in the Intel community, you're talking to me, and we're, kind of figuring out what's going on in that Venn diagram. And I think that's key to remember, as spouses. There's, at least the way I explain, detail and process to our officers, there's a Venn diagram. There's the Navy's needs, the sailor desires, and then where the 2 meet up right in the middle. And we try to get as much of the shot group in that middle section as possible. But again, the Navy's needs are going to take the the primary focus. But overall, in comparison to the enlisted process, I think this is a lot more intimate process, and a lot better. Because if you don't get a billet, maybe you'll understand a little bit better why, and you're just not denied, on the computer, process that's really doesn't have any, sort of feedback.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
On the aviation side, we'll ask them to send us their preferences about 12 to 13 months out, depending on if they are, we'll just say CONUS, and then if they're OCONUS, EFM, or spouse COLA, we'll ask them to send us their preferences 13 months out. so we get an idea what they're looking for when we start the negotiation process.
That's great to know. And what is the timeline for picking orders after you've first been selected for either LDO or warrant in comparison to when they're actually getting commissioned and transfer? How far out or should our spouses be expecting for that?
That timeline varies. And why is it? It varies. So I would say normally you should have your orders in hand about the 6 months mark. You'll have the orders in hand. But now remember, it's all based on funding. So at certain times of the year, it might be pushed a little bit later. I would say the summer months, sometimes you might get them a little bit less than that, like within 3 months out is when you'll get them. Reason why we're coming out to the end of the fiscal year for us is September. So during the summer months, getting orders out can be a shorter distance by times like right now. So it takes, but I would say normally by the 6 months mark, you'll have them. Now, with that said, there's certain circumstances and situations that you might get your orders on a short notice. Why I say that is we have ships, and when someone goes limited duty on board a ship, we have to come back and man that ship because you can't gap billets on ships. They need those officers there to do the mission and do the job. So if, for example, let's give you an example, a guy walking up a ladder on a ship, he walks up a ladder and he busts his knee, and he hurts his knee, and he has to be medical off the ship. He comes off the ship. Now we get an actual signal saying, hey, you need to get a replacement there, and we need a replacement real fast based on the technical qualities that individual have. So in that sense, someone might get orders within 2 months to get to that ship, to fill that billet. So it all varies. They really, I can't say there's an exact standard, but it all varies on situation. But when it's not situations like that, normally by the 6 month mark out, you should have your orders in hand to start making your moving plan and shipping your household goods to get to your next duty station.
That's great. And is that similar for the other communities as well?
Let's say for the newest sessions, the list just came out yesterday. Their call date is going to be probably late March, early April for an October commission. And we just kind of staggered out a month after that so they can anticipate receiving something within the next couple weeks, a letter from the aviation side saying, hey, congratulations. Here's your checklist as far as what's your experience, what would you like to do for follow-on orders, any COLO, EFM situations you want to address, those, let us know before your call date. And then we'll lay out their training track that they'll have. And then this is when you'll call, come talk to me, and then I'll let them know where they're going to go for their first set of orders.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's about the same for us. I think the only thing to add would be, you should expect to get commission and then leave right away. But there are, some cases where maybe the command needs you for a little bit longer, or like in my case, when I got commissioned, I stayed on the ship for about a month before I left. They had about a month to play with, my detailer did. It's all about timing and where they want to send you and what rotation date is for the person you're going to relieve. So that's about all I have to add.
Thank you. And Warrant Officer Harehill, is it about the same for your community as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, these gentlemen covered it. Everything's the same as far as, orders, expectations, and things like that. We started, at least for the list that was released yesterday, I've already started conversations with our, selects, not necessarily to the nitty gritty as to where they're going, but, I would say a fair barometer would be probably within a month, at least from us, a month after the list comes out, you should have a good idea where you're heading. So that allows us to collect the information from you, get your past experiences, EFM issues or spouse colo, so we can coordinate that and get orders ready for you. But I would say probably within a month after being selected, you should have an understanding where you're going to end up.
That sounds great. So we had one specific question for the Submariner detailer, and they're asking if you could talk a little bit about the direct to department head program.
Direct to department head?
Yeah, is that a thing? I'm not sure if they're asking in reference to LDO or warrant. They said, can the submarine detailer speak to the direct to department head program? Not sure. We may have to get back to that question.
I might have to do a homework assignment on that one. Here's where I wish I had my subject matter
Well,
expert.
I can talk to it a little bit from the surface side if you want me to jump in on that. The certain designators, when you are when we commission certain guys as ensign, because of the experience that they had from being enlisted, there are certain designators that already have the experience to be a department head. And so I will give you an example. For security, 6490, a security, usually there'll be a chief or a senior chief that cross over to warrant officer or cross over to LDO. We will take those warrant officers at times and put them on an installation as the base security officer. And that is a department head job. So in the past, we've had chief warrant officers and ensigns as base security officer. And that is their first tour. Their base security officer is a department head job. And so it's based on certain bases. It's small. You wouldn't give them a large base like Norfolk Naval Station or Little Creek, but some of our smaller installations, such as like Yorktown and some of the smaller bases, they can go there as a department head their first tour and become a department head. So here we have, a brand new ensign or a brand new warrant officer who just got commissioned already in a big leadership position. And that is because based on their prior experience, when we commission them and make them an officer, it was based on their potential, and we know they have the potential to succeed, so we can use them in that capacity. And so a security person coming in, he's already been working in security, he's already been doing base security and doing that stuff. So now we bring him in and make him a department head into our installations. So that's just an example of being commissioned and going straight to department head.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I couldn't be more specific on that. And another question, what do the sea and shore rotations look like for the LDO and CWO communities as far as how long they can expect to be at sea before they go back to shore duty and then back to sea again?
For us, the standard is, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken.
Say for us, it's a 36-month sea, 36 months shore as a standard rotation. And then when they get to the department head level, it may be a little bit shorter at that 04 level where we're rolling them out of their department head to a post pinnacle, getting ready for a command tour for the aviation side.
Thank you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. 3 years sea, 3 years shore. That's the entering. Those are the standard orders that we give. Other than previously mentioned, Captain Farrell mentioned, if you go overseas unaccompanied, you can go 2 years.
Okay.
And that's the same for us as well. It's 3 years shore, 3 years sea. The only time that I'll adjust a little bit is if we have an individual that to them, say they're on board USS whatever ship, and they want to stay in a geographic area, but we don't have shore duty for them, but there's a sea duty assignment potential, then what I will do is take that next sea duty assignment and make it 2 years instead of 3. So they're spending 5 years at sea instead of 6.
Okay.
Now, I'll just jump in a little bit. There are situations that at times we may have to move an officer earlier than that 3-year mark. So for the surface side, sometimes we have to move someone early because we have another job that needs to be filled. And so once you have completed the 2-year mark, then we start looking to see when we can move you. So it's not identically like exactly 3 years. You might do 2 years and 6 months, 2 years and 4 months. We just need you to do the 2 years. And once that 2 years is done, based on timing, because the stars don't always align and timing don't always work to make it exactly that 3 years. So sometimes I might have to move somebody at the 2-year, 4-month mark, 2-year, 5-month mark to move on to the next assignment to fill that other milestone billet. So that's from the surface side.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Another question that we just got from the chat box. How many chief warrant officers are in the Navy, and how does that compare to how many are selected every year to become new chief warrant officers? Warrant Officer Harehill?
I think we're gonna have to get back to you on that. I honestly have no idea.
I do know
I honestly don't know.
I do know that you can go over to My Navy HR, and a lot of times the lists, you can see how many are selected every year once they're posted there from I know that the results just came out yesterday, so you can kind of get a gauge there of how many we're selecting every year. Another question we have here.
I was going to say, Danielle, real quick on that. So I'll get with CW05 Hector Sandoval, who's the Warrant Officer Community Manager, and get that number so you guys can put that out however you want. But, you know, one thing I will say is if you're a spouse and you're concerned about, you know, your sailor or your friend getting picked up, if they're making one, you have a 50-50 shot. It doesn't matter how many are in existence, doesn't matter how many are being made. If there's one, 50-50 shot. You either make it or you don't.
Thank you. Excellent advice. So another question we had in advance of our presentation today was in regards to exceptional family members, or the EFM program. And I know you guys all briefly talked about how you try to take those considerations in when you're helping sailors with the detailing process, but obviously the needs of the Navy come first. Is there typically sufficient billets to keep families and sailors together, or are we seeing more unaccompanied and geo-batch situations these days?
I'll jump in on that. Well, family is very important, and I can't stress that enough. When we look at a member who has an EFM case, that is looked at, and if it's going to cause a hardship to the family by moving that member, 99% of the time we wouldn't move that member, and we'll know that. For example, if that member has two twins, I'll just use an example, has twins, and both twins is on the EFM and have some medical issues, and medical states that the husband needs to be there for support of the EFM family members, we wouldn't move the member. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to move him and create hardship for the family. So if it's going to create a hardship for the family, and that is, we have a medical department that briefs us and let us know how the EFM is. So we're not just trying to think about it or make it up. It actually has to be on paper. If it's on paper that service member needs to be around to support that family, 99.9% of the time we wouldn't move him to create a hardship to the family. So just to answer that, EFM, we take EFM very seriously. We have, like I said, a medical staff here in Millington that briefs us and let us know the severity of that EFM. And then based on the severity of it. So now EFM, in some cases, like very large areas that has a big military facilities that can accommodate, like Norfolk and San Diego, when we have those situations, we try to have that member stationed in those locations so where we can give him different variety of jobs so he can still continue to promote and support his family. And but that's the surface side.
Thank you. And I would assume it probably is very similar in the others, that, you know, you try your best, if at all possible, to keep the families together. And sometimes those situations come up, and it's unfortunate, but it's just a byproduct of the job sometimes. Another question we have.
I would. The only thing I would add on to what Captain Farrell said is that it's crucial that the member stays on top of the assessment of their EFM's dependent, right? So there's a certain period of time that they have where they need to make sure they're revisiting that. So you may have EFM Cat X, right? And it's time for you to negotiate orders, and you're in a much less restrictive category, but your child has actually been updated to be far more restrictive and can't move. But from a detailing desk, we just look at your notes and we see, well, hey, you have an EFM, say 3 versus, you know, something else. So it's very important, especially as you come into your negotiation window, to make sure your EFM category represents the actual status of your dependent at that time.
Right, absolutely. And I know for our family, we were once EFM, and then we were unenrolled from the program because the condition went away. And so it was important to make sure that was updated as well, so we weren't restricted as well. So good notes, great information. We have another question for a specific community. It says, what locations are available for, I'm assuming this says says in our LDOs, I think that's nuclear reactor, maybe LDOs, but it says in our LDOs, they said there isn't much information online, and they were just wondering what they could expect as far as which duty stations are available.
Yeah, those are, you're right, that's nuclear or naval reactors. So for the nukes, when you get commissioned, we have fleet LDOs that go to the fleet and serve the ships, and then we also have these NR or naval reactor LDOs, and they go into the program which does the oversight for operation of nuclear reactors. The simple answer is, I know there's not much advertised on it, but location wise, if the nukes are already familiar where our submarines and our carriers are already stationed, like basically the major areas, Norfolk, San Diego, for the carriers, the two big ones, anywhere that the subs, for the submarine folks that are familiar where the submarines are stationed, anywhere there's a nuclear ship or a submarine, there's a local office there that basically provides the oversight, and they'll go down and they'll monitor the ship or the sub and do those kind of duties. And then their main headquarters is up in DC, so DC is a good location for that. And then there's a couple outlying like laboratories in like Pittsburgh, so there's a couple of places in the interstates that you could be stationed as well. We have our schoolhouse down in Charleston, so Charleston, South Carolina is another option. But basically, yeah, the quick answer would be anywhere our nuclear carriers and our subs are, there's a local, one or more local offices or the shipyards that you could go to.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question that we received during registration was in regards to sailors who might get picked up for either LDO or warrant, and they switch communities altogether. So they might go from submarines to surface or aviation to surface, and they're changing whole new communities. Can they expect a significantly more amount of schools when that happens? Or is there additional support for that transition from one community to another, or are they just expected to kind of roll with it?
I think something that we're good as far as the LDOCW community is the network. So whatever new community they're going to, I'd recommend that an individual reach out to their new detailer and ask, hey, what's going to be expected of me? What kind of training is going to happen? Just like a new accession per se. And then if the spouse has questions, whoever the sponsor is going to be for that gaining command can probably enlighten them on what the spouse can expect on their end as well. But we're really good in the community as a whole as far as sharing information with each other. So I'd highly recommend that.
Great, that's great advice. Always use the people you have within and make it as smooth as possible. So we have another question for the warrant officer programs. It says, does the warrant officer program still follow the Navy's newest thoughts to try to maintain a service member if they have a junior entering a senior year? I'm assuming that they're talking about like if they have children that are in high school and they become a newly commissioned warrant officer. Are they still able to take that in consideration when it comes to picking orders?
I would say that's a Navy policy, so it's always taken into consideration. Whether or not it's feasible or viable, it depends on the specific detail of what builds they may have available. But due to the fact that it is a Navy policy, then it's taken into consideration and evaluated. That's not a guarantee that it's going to work out that way, right? So we have to understand that our new accession officers, they've raised their hand. They said, "Hey, commission me. I'm ready to go do the nation's business." And that may result in a geobatch situation. That's the particular decision the family has to make. But to the crux of the question, the policy is evaluated, and if at all possible, we will honor that. But also understand, at least for the information warfare community at large, the expectation for our first tour warrant officers is to go to sea. So if that opportunity presents itself, then good, and if not, then it may just not work out.
And I'll give an example of it. Like going back to the earlier question, when there was like the difference between enlisted and the officer, and I said there's a lot more job opportunity for enlisted than they are for officers. So for example, an example would be you have a enlisted guy that's in Oklahoma, just using that as an example, Oklahoma as a recruiter. So he's a chief petty officer in Oklahoma on recruiting duty, and he makes LDO, or he makes warrant officer. We do not have any ships in Oklahoma. And so he has a kid in high school. Our ships is located in Norfolk, Maple. We have ships in a lot of areas, but we don't have a ship home ported in Oklahoma. So once he picks up officers, he's like, I got my kid that's in high school, my child that's in high school, and I got to be in Oklahoma. We don't have an officer billet in Oklahoma. So now that's where that situation comes into the warrant officer saying we have to make a decision there because we have to get him to his first officer assignment. And that officer assignment is not in the location where in Oklahoma where we don't have any billets there. And that's where that situation where we can't fulfill that need. Just an example.
Thank you both. As a fellow Okie, I have to say my dad asked me every time we pick new orders, did they move a ship to Lake Texoma? And I have to say, no, they didn't move a ship on Lake Texoma. So I understand that sentiment. Let's see, what are some of the other questions we got in our registration? One was, what are the expectations for career milestones and advancements? And they followed up by saying, are promotions automatic with time and service and rank, or are all advancements for LDO and CWO promotions like screened through a board?
I guess I can cover the LDO side of the house.
Okay.
So for Lieutenant JG, and I'll talk about years of commissioned service. So 2 years, Lieutenant JG, and they talk about, we use the phrase of all fully qualified. So that all fully qualified is, you know, you've got the fit reps, you haven't gotten any trouble. If so, you're going to promote in 2 years to Lieutenant JG. Another 2 years at the 4-year mark, it's all fully qualified for lieutenant. We start rolling into the boards is lieutenant commander, and that's at your 9 to 11 year mark for the LDOs. And there's a 70 to 90% promotion opportunity there that the OCM tries to achieve. And then for commanders, that's the 15 to 17 year mark for commissioned service, and it's a 60 to 80% promotion opportunity. And then for captain, it's a 21 to 23 year mark, and then you have a 40 to 60% promotion opportunity there.
Thank you so much. And how does that compare for the warrant officer side of the house?
So for the warrant officer side, W2, W3 is, as the captain said, all fully qualified. And then at the W4 levels, when you start to break out, you know, amongst your peers and things like that. And then, you know, W5, you know, because more competitive and things. But your initial, you know, look at W3, as long as you haven't gotten any trouble or done anything bad, you should, you know, promote and are all fully qualified. And then it goes from there.
Okay. So we just got a question in the chat box. It says, how strongly is spouse co-location honored when one spouse is enlisted and the other is officer? Is the same instance where both spouses are officers? So I'm not quite sure what the second part of that means, but if you've got, yes, you know, one enlisted spouse versus an officer, are they still trying to keep them in the same location?
Yes, and I know the second part of it is the second part of the question they asked it, if it's an officer, both officers married. So the married couple is both officers, or if it's enlisted and an officer. Okay. So just to that with it, they're treated the same. So okay, if we have a member and his spouse is an officer or the spouse is enlisted, it really doesn't matter. It's treated the same. And as a matter of fact, the enlisted side kind of, to me, have more opportunities because they have more job opportunities where you can get them stationed together. But at all means in the Navy, I mean, that's kind of a rule to, you know, if your spouse, wherever we're going to station you at, we need to make sure that your spouse is going to be there. The only big part that I see where sometimes it comes into being a little challenging is timing. Because sometimes you might have to send one spouse ahead of the other spouse a little bit earlier. We recently had a situation where one of the members is a CMC, a Command Master Chief enlisted, and the spouse is a lieutenant. And the CMC got selected to go to Italy. And the CMC program is very selective. You have to be nominated and then be selected. So he gets selected to go to Italy. And so looking at the timing to get a relief in, we had to move the lieutenant, who is the spouse of the CMC. We had to send her there like 3 months later. So they but we're going to get them together. But sometimes it's just the timing doesn't work to get them all the family traveling. That don't happen on a high percentage of time, but there are times where that happens.
Okay, sounds great. So we've got a lot of questions rolling here. I'm trying to keep track of all of them. One person said, does the warrant officer program GO batch policy differ from the enlisted side because there are fewer billets available?
I would have to understand, a little more context to the question, but I mean, as far as like a GO batch program, unless you're going unaccompanied tour, I mean, it's all universal. It shouldn't really matter whether you're enlisted or officer or whatnot. And what I've seen, at least in my portfolio, if somebody goes GO batch, it's a choice. There's very few jobs that I have, and I know we're lucky in that regard because we're not. That's certainly not the rule across the Navy. But as far as GO batch, unaccompanied tours, accompanied tours, it really shouldn't matter, whether you're an officer or enlisted.
Okay. And then we have one other general question. It didn't specify whether they're looking at LDO versus warrant, but they said if you're moving from coast to coast, and I would even throw in there if you're moving from, say, Hawaii to Italy, or a very long distance, does that same time frame for selection and receiving orders apply just based on what we talked about earlier about where we're at in the fiscal year and just the whole process? Is there any consideration given when they're big moves?
The part I would offer to that is not necessarily, well, absolutely not coast to coast moves, but OCONUS moves. Usually the release posture for orders, that window is open maybe 2 to 3 months more to the right. Right.
Oh.
So if you're making an OCONUS move, you may see your orders a little bit sooner than you would if you're just doing a CONUS move, depending on what the release posture is. And as Captain Farrell said earlier, depending where we are in the fiscal year and monies and things like that.
And is that just to allow for things like overseas screenings and passports and visas and all that stuff?
Absolutely.
That goes
yeah,
okay.
And coordinating household goods and vehicle shipments and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add on too, just because we're talking about orders, and I just gonna clarify something. Now, once they become an officer, right? And for example, if you have a guy who is stationed in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, and his next job is in Norfolk, Virginia, and there's no cost involved in it, he might get his orders 9 months in advance because there's no cost involved in it. So funding play a huge issue in part of the orders timing. Funding play a huge issue with the budget. So if it's a no-cost orders, a member is stationed in Norfolk and he's going to another ship in Norfolk or a shore duty in Norfolk, that orders can be pushed up because it's a no cost and it's the same location. So just to clarify that. So if a member is on the same location, he should get his orders pretty quick.
Okay, that's great information to know, because sometimes it feels like, man, we've got more work to do and they got theirs first. But it all comes down, we got to pay for it somehow.
Correct.
So one of the questions we got on our registration forms here, it said, with CW orders being more repetitive in nature, I think meaning like doing the same job over and over, how does that compare for the LDO communities? Can they expect more repetitive in nature jobs, or will they be switching up as they, go from one billet to the next?
I'll jump in again. There's a difference, right? A warrant officer is more of a technical expertise. So he's more of the technical expertise, where LDO is more leader and manager.
Okay.
For warrant officers, a lot of the job is repetitive because you need that technical expertise at that particular command at that time. Warrant officers normally don't be executive officers and commanding officers. So I'll just give you that example. So that's why for LDOs, when you look at the milestone tour, you look at the LDO career path, he's going to go from being a division officer to a department head, to an executive officer, to an OIC, officer in charge, to a commanding officer, right? We have CO billets. A warrant officer does not do CO. He's 9 times out of 10. Very, very seldom you find a warrant officer that has a CO billet and it can be a CO. Now they do a little bit of OIC. So a lot of the warrant officer job is kind of repetitive in nature, to where I can give you on the surface side where someone commissioned as a warrant officer and he's a deck type LD warrant officer. He's considered called a bosun. So he's gonna go, all his jobs at sea gonna always be bosun. So when he goes from ship to ship to ship, whether he goes on a carrier, whether he goes to an amphibious ship, he's gonna be a ship's bosun. So it's gonna be the repetitive job, but on different platforms. And at times, timing might have him doing the same platform, because that's how warrant officers is. They're the technical expert that needed. Vice an LDO, he's gonna go to a ship, he's gonna be a division officer, then he goes back to the ship again, he's gonna be a department head, then he goes to another command, he's gonna be the executive officer. So that's the difference. Why LDO is not as repetitive as warrant officers.
All right, well, we've got one last question, and then we'll wrap up our event for today. We're so thankful that you guys could join us. So as sailors are transitioning from one LDO and chief warrant officer billet to another, are they able to see downstream fill lists in advance, or is there like a particular window that they finally get to kind of see what's available?
I will say for the aviation community, we list what jobs that we're advertising about 12 to 13 months out on our My Navy HR page. So I highly encourage our constituents to take a look at that before they send us their preferences, because we'll have a lot of cases where they're asking for Florida, and I have no billets in Florida. So I try to keep it open as far as this is what is available. Take a look at it, and then we'll go from there as far as the negotiation process.
Wonderful. Is that the same for the other communities as well?
We don't list all ours on the website. However, we do a lot of detailing trips where we'll just rotate around and visit different areas and whatnot. And it's always encouraged to have as much participation there, because our detailers will sit down. They bring their work laptops with them, and they'll flip it open, and that's where they'll share, and say, hey, if you're looking at your next tour right now, here's what it looks like rotation wise. You can start thinking about, negotiation process. We talked about it could be, a year out. We can start telling you what's available and, giving you some choices, and go back and forth with you as we try to narrow that down to exactly what you want for your next job.
All right.
Yeah, well, I'll add in for the surface side, we do the same thing, kind of what Steve was saying, Commander Dwyer. About a year out, we start communicating with you, start seeing what are your limitations, what the options are available for you. And usually by the 9 month, we get something locked in for you. Now, take it, the newer sessions is a little bit different, because, for example, we just got the results out in October. Will be the first set that's getting commissioned. So that will be less than 12 months. So they're a little bit different than the normal officers that's already have been commissioned and moving on. But just to give an idea, 12 months out, you start communicating with your detail and let them know your limitations, if there's any, if you have an EFM, if you have any issues of moving, things like that. And then by the 9 month mark, you kind of have an idea. We also have, as Captain Sutter said, we also have a website where we list some of the hot fields. So we don't list all of ours, but we list the hot field one, the ones that we need that we need filled like the soonest. Also, Danielle, before we move on, I do have an answer for you for the warrant officers. So once you finish this question, I want to come back to that to answer the question that came up earlier.
Okay, sounds great. And Warren Harehill, how does that compare for the Intel community?
So for the Intel community, we have a mill suite page, and we post a web slate online, so officers can go, they can take a look at what may be coming up during their PRD. But as it pertains specifically to warrant officers, as I said at the very beginning, we're broken down by competency areas. So you may see a billet listed for Florida, but you may not be able to get it because you don't possess that specialty. So in most cases, when it comes to detailing process, I will contact the officer before they contact us, because usually I do detailing by fiscal year, and we do it in anticipation of the next year's warrant officer selections. So, ordinarily we'll detail maybe 18, months out is the rule.
Okay, that sounds great. And I'll go back to Captain Farrell.
Yeah, from earlier question, it was asked how many chief warrant officers we have in the Navy.
Oh, yeah.
And from the community manager's shop, we have 1,973 chief warrant officers. So that's 1,973.
Wow.
And to go with that, we have 2,143 billets. So the chief warrant officer community right now is 92% man. Also, the other question was how many we made this year. And this year, the results that just came out, we made 241 chief warrant officers this year.
That's wonderful. Congratulations to all of them that made it. I hope that their spouses are able to go back and view this as they process this new news, both for the warrant and LDO community. Well, that concludes our event for today. And if we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. And we may be able to follow up at some point and post some kind of, document with some commonly asked questions that we didn't get to today. But we're so thankful for all of you for joining us. Thank you to all of our detailers, Captain Sudeth, Captain Farrell, Commander Dwyer, and Chief Warrant Officer Hara Hill. We want to thank you for your time and your expertise with us today. Also, a huge shout out to our friends at the Navy League of the United States for allowing us to use their go-to webinar and for all their IT support during the planning process. As we mentioned at the beginning, we'll provide the link for part 1 of the Navy Mustang Spouse Symposium concluding this event. Please stay tuned to our core Facebook page as we'll be posting this video. Yes, we recorded it today. We'll be posting it so you can go back and view it again at your convenience, so you can write down some of those notes if you didn't get them today. Please visit the Naval Services FamilyLine website at nsfamilyline.org to check out all of our programs and to follow the Naval Services FamilyLine and core Facebook pages so you can stay up to date with our future events. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at another core and Naval Services FamilyLine event again soon.